Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And it is now 7 o'clock. So we're going to get started with Anna Mulcahy and Caitlin O'Donoghue.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fenwick High School's annual and Smedinghoff Memorial Lecture. So I am Caitlin O'Donoghue.
And I am Anna Mulcahy.
And we are your senior co-presidents of the Fenwick International Relations Club. And to begin tonight's event, I would like to introduce our lovely president, Mr. Father Pettigord, to start us off with an opening prayer.
Thank you very much, Caitlin and Anna. And for our opening prayer, what I'd like to use is a prayer written by Pope Francis. This past year, he issued his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which is subtitled On Fraternity and Social Friendship. And I think the prayer that he wrote for this encyclical is so important for us tonight. We remember Anne and her work. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
Lord, Father of our human family, you created all human beings equal in dignity. Pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit and inspire in us a dream of renewed encounter, dialogue, justice, and peace. Move us to celebrate healthier societies and a more dignified world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence, and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects, and shared dreams. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father Pettigord. And now we are going to turn our attention to Fenwick alumni and current math teacher, Mr. Kevin Roach, who is a great friend of Anne and will give us a history of the memorial lecture.
Thanks, Anna. I was a classmate of Anne's from St. Luke's. I went to St. Luke's with her and graduated from Fenwick with her. So for many years, we're in school together, 12 years we're in school together. I will say another Fenwick alum who's also a teacher here was dear friends to Anne, even when she passed away, and that's Chrissy Talrico. So if any of you know Chrissy Talrico Lilick, the Spanish teacher there, Anne is still near and dear to her heart, more than she is to all of us, because she was super close with her. And so, Chrissy was super close as well. So the lecture was actually started by Miss Irene Drago, who's on. Hi, Irene, good to see you. A former Spanish teacher at Fenwick. And in honor of Anne. When Anne passed away, we were all so moved by it. And Irene wanted to have her memory be kept alive by something tangible. And this is the thing that is tangible, this lecture that continues to talk about public service and the value of serving the community as a whole. And so Irene talked about Anne's serene beauty when she passed away. And this continues to bring that beauty on now, where we're trying to call others to that life of public service that Anne lived so wonderfully. And the scholarship was also created in Anne's memory. It's given to one senior every year, a rising senior every year. We have 2 people on now that have gotten it. And it's a $2,000 scholarship. So juniors apply around the winter time, and they send in an essay, and they hand in their transcript, and a committee decides on who the winner is. And so we've given $2,000 scholarships each year to rising seniors for some time now, thanks to the many generous donors who've helped keep that scholarship around. It takes a good amount of money to keep that money going and keep those scholarships going. So thanks to all those donors who allowed that to happen, so we continue to have Anne in our memory there. As we move on and we hear about the scholarship winners, before we do, I do want to reflect quickly on what we're doing here, right? We're continuing Anne's legacy because of the community that she helped cultivate. Anne was a person of the community, just like all the Smedinghoffs were. She was a great member of the Fenwick community at Johns Hopkins as well. She wanted to serve the community. Right after she graduated, she rode her bike 4,000 miles to raise money for cancer. What a cool adventure, but what a selfless thing
there's
to
66
do.
people.
To be so saddle sore for so
There's gonna
long,
be like 5.
to do it for others. And so Anne was certainly like that, and I think she was like that because of her family. If any of you know the Smedinghoffs, they are a people of the community. Mrs. Smedinghoff, I see her as an election judge, or I see her throughout the community helping to serve others. Mr. Smedinghoff as well, they're both faithful parishioners serving their parish and on boards too in the local community. They work to serve the community just like Anne did. And so we're honoring Anne's legacy, which is certainly so great, partially because of her parents. Her parents are such wonderful people. And so thank you for everybody coming on, helping to honor my classmate from 2005 and to help live on her legacy. She's a selfless soul who I continue to pray for, especially this time every year. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roach. And now I will introduce my friend, Sarah Tersich, the 2020 award recipient of the Anne Smedinghoff Scholarship.
I first heard about Anne and her journey during first semester in Mr. Quinn's history class. He has always had a niche for remembering every single student he has ever taught and recalling where they sat. Mr. Quinn announced that Anne's seat was the third seat from the front window. In other words, my seat. This sliver of a connection made me intrigued. We learned about her upbringing, her time at Fenwick, her experiences at Johns Hopkins, and later her passion for international studies. I too had a passion for diplomacy and international studies, which made applying for this scholarship in memoriam to Anne a no-brainer. I have applied to many scholarships during my time here at Fenwick, mostly college-related. However, not being chosen to receive the given scholarship is how the game goes most of the time. So when I learned I was the recipient for the class of 2021, I was ecstatic. Winning this award only reinforced the idea that having diligence towards your goal makes your chance of achieving your goal that much higher. Being the recipient of the Anne Smedinghoff Scholarship has been one of the single most important aspects of my life. I plan to make Anne proud in my future aspirations and will always look back at Fenwick as the foundation for my passions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So I would now like to announce our second scholarship winner tonight, Miss Cody Johnson, and she just so happens to be in my economics class. And Cody is an incredibly brilliant young woman. So here's Cody.
Thank you, Caitlin, for the introduction. When I first heard about the Anne Smedinghoff Memorial Scholarship, my main reason for applying had more to do with knowing Anne's story than it did with anything else. I had heard about Anne from my siblings, specifically my brother Kyle, who had met her when he was a senior at Fenwick in Miss Lovis's foreign policy class when Anne visited, and which was shortly before she left for Afghanistan. I will be taking that same class from Miss Lovis when I begin my senior year in the fall. I've always had an interest in foreign policy, political science, and its influence on human rights in the world. So Anne's story has had a big impact on me. I'm very honored and humbled to receive this year's scholarship. And I'll do my very hardest and try to carry out the values Anne exhibited and continue her legacy as I move forward in my education and career. She made an impact on me before I was ever a Fenwick Friar, and Anne will continue to do so even after I graduate. So again, thank you for selecting me as the recipient of this generous scholarship.
Thank you so much, Cody. That was beautiful. Now I would like to introduce one of my favorite teachers who I had the honor of having my freshman year for Western Civilization, Mr. Dr. Lord. And he is actually my younger brother's 8th grade teacher at St. Francis now.
That's right. That's right. Hello, welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to introduce Michael Negron as our speaker tonight. Michael personifies the Fenwick ministry. Fenwick was started in 1929 to prepare adolescents from immigrant Catholic families for college to make the transition from the working class to the middle class. Michael came to Fenwick from the Humboldt Park neighborhood in Chicago. His father is an immigrant from Puerto Rico. His mother is an immigrant from Guatemala. It's a teacher's greatest joy is to be surpassed by his students. And Michael has certainly lived up to that expectation. Michael decided early on to put faith and confidence in God and not inside institutions. Michael had decided that he was going to be responsible for his personal happiness and not depend upon institutions to do that for him. Mike got into a wonderful university, Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And sometimes people think I get into the perfect school, it'll make my life perfect. Mike knew otherwise. Mike wanted to join the Naval ROTC. Georgetown did not have a Naval ROTC program. So Michael took his Naval ROTC at George Washington University, which is on the other side of the city from Georgetown. When Mike got out of Georgetown and wrapped up at George Washington, he did not get a plum Navy assignment. He wasn't sent to Hawaii or San Diego or Naples. Mike got sent to Memphis, Tennessee. Okay. Mike took lemons and he made lemonade. Took advantage of the opportunity to pursue graduate studies in political science at Memphis State University. Mike has made his own breaks. People can't say yes unless you ask, and don't ever say no for them. In 2004, Mike entered an MTV contest. Thousands of people were in the contest, and the winner would make an address to the Democratic National Convention held that year in Boston, Massachusetts. You go on YouTube, you can see Michael's address at the Democratic National Convention. He did a great job. He put into practice all the things he had learned from Mr. Arlano when he was a sophomore at Fenwick, and all the things that our current friars are learning from Mrs. McGrady. Mike's success presenting that speech brought him to the attention of John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Rahm Emanuel. And Michael has worked in government under the administrations of all these different individuals. So Mike has had a lot of success inside of his life, and he's made that success for himself. But no one bats 1,000. Babe Ruth struck out 1,116 times. Mike was an unsuccessful candidate for the Chicago City Council last year. The Spirit works in mysterious ways. I'm sure the Spirit has plans for Michael above and beyond the Chicago City Council. So I'd like to conclude by saying that of all the things Michael has done, the things of which we're the proudest at Fenwick, he has been an attentive adult child to his parents. He is a devoted spouse and a devout Catholic, a devoted spouse and a loving parent. And those are great accomplishments, greater than anything else that we could attempt in our lives. Both Mike and Ann, when they were at Fenwick, were very ordinary kids. And they did extraordinary things with the gifts that God gave them. Anything Mike did, anything Ann did, is within the capacities of all the Fenwick Friar students who are listening tonight. If these guys could do it, you could do it also. And if we want to honor Ann in her service to our country, there's three things we need to do. We need to read. Ann lost her life bringing books to a literacy campaign in Afghanistan. We need to vote. Ann was in Afghanistan bringing democracy. And we need to serve. We need to serve in government just like Ann and just like Mike. So thank you very much for this opportunity to offer my opinions. And I'm going to sign off and be quiet now. Goodbye.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lorden. And I want to thank the Fenwick community for giving me the opportunity to talk to everyone here today. I'm also really happy to see Mr. Quinn, who was very important in my career at Fenwick. It's been a while, so I'm happy to see you here today. I'm Michael Negron. I'm currently a special advisor to the SBA administrator. I am coming into this role most immediately after serving as the assistant director at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity under Governor Pritzker. Before that, I was chief of policy to Rahm Emanuel during his time as mayor of the city of Chicago. I spent some time in Washington at the Pentagon and at the Office of Management and Budget in the White House under President Obama. And as Dr. Lorden noted and reminded me, I ran for 47th Ward Alderman in the 2019 municipal cycle, and I did not win. I got to the runoff. I did not win, but it was a good experience. Required me to call people and ask them for money. It required me to knock on door after door, asking for their votes and hearing their stories. I stood on L platforms, introducing myself to strangers. I had people yell at me that were either just angry to be accosted or didn't like people I had worked for. So it is a real remarkable experience, and I'm fortunate to have had it. I currently live in the North Center neighborhood of Chicago, which is not far from Lincoln Square, with my wife Coral and our two children, who are ages 7 and 5. This summer, we're going to be moving to Arlington, Virginia, as we go into the summer, hopefully, and everybody starts kind of going back to the office. Within the Biden administration, we're expecting to start needing to be back in person towards the end of the summer. So we'll be selling our house here. We've got a place in Virginia. My kids are going to finish school here, and then we'll move over there. So it's a lot of change for our family. We'll see how it goes. I'm hoping that it goes well, but as Dr. Lorden mentioned, nothing's guaranteed. So it's a different path. I've been in local and Illinois politics for the last decade or so. I don't know President Biden, like he's not someone I have a relationship with. So I'm taking a chance. It's an opportunity to work on some national issues, and I'm hopeful that it'll pan out. And fortunately, I'm very lucky that I've got a wife who's willing to endure that with me. So we'll see. But I'm happy to be a part of the Ann Smedinghoff Memorial Lecture. I think it's a wonderful opportunity and tradition for this community to honor and recognize public service and remember Ann's sacrifice, losing her life at such a young age while overseas and serving our country while in harm's way in Afghanistan. And it's a reminder, as if we needed one, but it is a reminder that decisions made in public service are very fraught with consequence. And the people who make those decisions, more often than not, don't experience those consequences directly. And so I think it emphasizes then the need for more of those who are in positions to make such decisions to be good people. As a refrain of one of my former bosses, Senator Warren, was that personnel is policy. And that was shorthand for recognition that the quality and the substance of decisions made in any organization is going to be reflective of who's in those organizations. And so it's my hope that the tradition of this lecture and my experience firsthand with Fenwick's commitment to honoring public service will encourage more and more alumni to consider careers in public service. I'm hopeful that the experience of the last, it's really 2 decades. It seems like the last few years have been very busy, but the last few decades have been very transformative. There's been a lot of tumult in our national politics, a lot of tumult locally and at the state level, and we need people to view public service as a vocation, and we need more good people to go into public service And I think Fenwick is, with its emphasis on educating the whole person, can be a real driver of positive public change. As Dr. Lord mentioned, I'm the child of immigrants. I was born and raised here in Chicago. My father moved to Chicago from Puerto Rico when he was 14 years old. My mother came from Guatemala undocumented. She came from Guatemala undocumented when she was 19. My dad dropped out of high school to work to support his family. He came with his mom and his brother. His dad had come a few years before to work in the US, and he wasn't in school very long before he needed to drop out to help. But fortunately for us and our family, he was able to provide a middle-class life because he had something that's increasingly rare today, which is a stable union job in manufacturing, which could provide a middle-class life. And he worked for 35 years at Navistar in Melrose Park. I used to be International Harvester, became Navistar, and I think the facility is actually closing. It may have already closed, and if it hasn't, it's closing soon, reflective of trends in the national economy, and actually a reminder of why President Biden's focus on rebuilding our supply chain and reinvigorating manufacturing domestically is important. My mother worked in a variety of part-time jobs while raising us. She went to community college, one or two courses at a time, ultimately went to college. And while I was in the end of my freshman year at Fenwick, she earned her college degree and became a CPS, a Chicago Public Schools teacher in her 40s. And she retired a few years ago. Their emphasis on my education, on my sister's education, was really critical. Despite the limits of their own education, they both very closely followed politics. They talked about them with each other. They talked about it with me. They encouraged my history and my interest in history and current events. They never discouraged me from considering career paths in government and politics, paths that didn't carry much promise of financial reward. Although you could look at some recent examples of Chicago politics, and it seems like there are plenty of people who go into it with an eye on private reward, but it was not something they discouraged, and that was very formative. And so as long as I can remember, really, I wanted to be in the path that I'm on. It motivated so many of the decisions I made, even as a teenager. As a high school junior, I found out about a summer journalism program at American University in DC, and I applied using money that I'd earned working my first job at Famous Liquors in Forest Park, which I think is still there. I was a stocker. Once I had enough to pay for that, I quit. That summer in Washington convinced me that that's where I wanted to be. And so over the course of my senior year, I only applied to colleges in the DC area. I didn't have any local backup plan. Everything was DC area. Fortunately, I was able to get into some good colleges. I was able to win a Navy ROTC scholarship, which ensured that we didn't have to go into debt in order for me to get my degree. I'm not sharing this to tick through my biography. I'm looking to make a point that's as committed as my parents were to our education. These decisions that I think have set me up on the path I'm on is because of the access that I had to mentors and advice at Fenwick. I don't think he would say he originated it, but he didn't, because I've heard it a lot of other places since then. But something that Rahm Emanuel used to say a lot when talking about education was, you can't be what you can't see. I had very loving parents, very dedicated to our education, but they were not professionals. They had not gone to college. They did not have networks of people they can talk to and consult on good programs for us and good opportunities for us. And these things are very important. The ability to navigate the system, different institutions of power, institutions of influence, the ability to understand the right opportunities at the right time. These are things that, had I been somewhere else, I may have had no exposure to them. And that's why your educational experience is so important. That's why Fenwick was so important, particularly for me. I think academically, I would have been fine. I think, my work ethic would have been fine. But if you put me in a different environment, I don't think I'm where I am right now. And so to that, I really credit my time at Fenwick, where the expectation was that we would go to college, and the expectation was that we would achieve distinction, and the expectation was that we would pursue our lives in a moral and ethical way and trying to have a positive impact. And it really, I just don't think I would be where I am had I not had this experience. And so as I think about that, I've tried to take that as part of my approach to the various policy issues that I've worked on in my career. And so I want to highlight just two things really, and they're going to seem a little disjointed, but as I worked on them, I really did think about how I got to where I was. And it's motivated by, I think the opportunity to achieve the American dream and have a better life, it starts with, having a safe home, having a steady income. Those are sort of the basics. But there's dignity and there's power that comes with the ability to shape your own life. And the public sector has an important role in conjunction with the educational institutions, in conjunction with churches, in conjunction with other important institutions to play in all of this. And it takes commitment, and it takes being intentional about it. And so there's two public policy initiatives that I've worked on where I really, in the course of working on it, I reflected a lot back on my path. So the first of these is the STAR Scholarship. And I don't know if folks are familiar with this, but I think if you asked Mayor Emanuel, what are the initiatives he's most proud of, this is probably top 2 or 3. This is a program where CPS, Chicago Public Schools graduates who earn a 3.0 are able to get free community college at the city colleges of Chicago. And the genesis of this initiative was the mayor's commitment, informed by the sort of growing thinking amongst educational scholars and his own advisors that education is a continuum and it should run from cradle to career. And you should be looking at data along the way and keeping an eye on what indicators from pre-K all the way through high school are the best predictors of future outcomes. And so as an administration, we focused on expanding access to full day pre-K. We made kindergarten full day for everybody. We actually had about half of CPS students were in a half day kindergarten, and the other half were not. We focused on STEM and vocational programs, and we significantly expanded access to early college credits, so things that we took for granted at Fenwick, the ability to take AP courses and graduate from high school with some college credit. There was virtually none of that in the Chicago public school system 2 decades ago. And we are at a point where more than half of CPS graduates now graduate with some form of early college or career credit. And that is the function and the outcome of very focused policy over the course of the last decade. And a recognition that those credits, it gives the students some extra credit to enter into college. It is the fact that it creates the expectation of going to college. Then the more that students are hearing about early college credit, the more it becomes part of the culture, the expectation that I'm not done after high school. I need to do more. And that is, the one of the central visions behind the Star Scholar program. It's the realization that in the modern economy, a high school diploma isn't sufficient. You may not need a college degree to be successful in the economy today, because there's a lot of good careers that can come with something short of a college degree, but you definitely need more than high school. There are programs at community colleges. There are credentials that someone can go for a year, get credentials, go back into the workforce, work a few more years, go back, get some more credentials. And those are valid and can be very lucrative career paths for people. And so he asked us to develop some programs
hospitals that are being used by doctors as indoctrination centers and advancing their own politicized views, that is using critical race theory, which is a nefarious and quite racist doctrine, and using the hospital.
Margie asked us to zoom in on this. This is a scholarship award for Cody.
Can folks mute if you're not
Yes,
if you're not talking? I'm sorry. I don't want to hold us up. So the the goal here was ultimately to create something universal, but do it in a way that reflected the fiscal state government here in Illinois. And so created this program with a GPA criteria that, number one, ensured that there was a big investment of time and energy on the part of the students, and also allowed us to keep the costs within a manageable range. And very importantly, something that I don't know had you had different people in the administration if we would have ended up here, but we ensured, and it was a priority to keep the program open to dreamers who otherwise had very limited access to financial aid because of their naturalization status. Federal programs are closed or federal student aid programs are closed to undocumented residents. And so that requires intentionality in how you structure your programs because so many state programs are tied to federal aid and often unthinkingly, local and state governments import over those restrictions. So if there's a restriction for non-citizens in a federal program, many state and local governments carry that over into what they're doing. And so if you are a dreamer who had the ability to be above board because of some changes made by the Obama administration, your parents brought you here. You didn't choose to be here. And it's been a priority to ensure that pathways of opportunity are open to those children. And well, now many are adults, but it required you to design your programs with intention and to think about that and factor it into our costs and our outreach. And so that's something I know that the former mayor is proud of, and it's something that I'm personally proud of, that we ensure that dreamers were able to access the program. And over time, we've strengthened that continuum. Now there are more than 36 four-year colleges and universities that do what we've called Star Plus, which is you graduate from CPS, get your STAR scholarship, get your associate's degree, do well, there's another scholarship for you that's specifically focused on the STAR Scholar. So you can go basically for free to the University of Chicago. There are generous scholarships to UIC, to Southern Illinois, to Dominican colleges all across the state have partnered with the city colleges to provide that continuum. And over the course of the past 5 years or so, thousands of CPS graduates have gone through this program, and they've earned debt-free post-secondary educations to help them get on this path to success. And I think it's a first step. I mean, it's something that increasingly today, when you think about, when I look back to 10, 15 years ago, today we have a president who's talking about universal free community college. And those discussions, that movement really started in the course of the last decade. And this City Colleges program was one of the first programs of its kind. And if I were a betting man, which I can't be, given what I'm doing, but if I were to bet, I would think that 10 years from now, it will be a given that people will be able to go at least to community college without incurring cost, hopefully more. But it starts with programs like this. And so it's something that I've been proud of, but it's something that in working on it, and it's not something I really talked about while I was in the office, but I thought a lot about sort of my own experience and how I got here and the importance of creating that expectation and then having it be something that was accepted as a norm. We're all going to college. We're all doing something after high school. And we're not there yet, but when you look at where the graduation rates for CPS are now, as compared to 15 years ago, and it was barely half, and now it's over 80%. It's the product of focused and intentional culture change, and I'm hopeful that it results in a lot of improved lives over the course of the next few decades. The second thing I want to hit on is something called the Community Navigator model, and it's a little esoteric, but it's a recognition that it's not enough just to create something. You create a program, even if it's designed to help the people who need it the most, you actually have to talk to them. You have to find the folks that we most want to help provide opportunity to are not on the internet all the time, right? They're not necessarily plugged into all they would need help filling out forms. They would need help even thinking something's available to them. And so at the heart of the Community Navigator model, and I think you're going to see it more and more as governments roll out new types of initiatives, is that in order to reach those populations that need help the most, you actually have to be focused on using trusted messengers, trusted ambassadors to reach those communities. And it's part of program design. It's not enough just to think, well, we should give this, we should forgive student debt, or we should, all the things that people are talking about now. You actually have to reach the individual to enable them to take advantage of something. I've been in a position where I've been able to work on that in a couple of different initiatives, and it's not something that I invented. In fact, I first was introduced to the concept by a very persistent advocate and leader who really beat me over the head with this idea when I was in the mayor's office. Shortly after Donald Trump took office, we created a free legal aid program for undocumented immigrants who were threatened with deportation under the new administration. We set aside funds. I was very proud of this at the time. I came up with this idea. I went to the mayor. We set aside funds to support pro bono legal aid for these individuals, but we didn't recognize that I didn't recognize, without a bridge to these services, many of the intended beneficiaries wouldn't access the program. They didn't trust government. And so we're trying to create this benefit for them. It wouldn't be enough just to say, here's a free lawyer if you're in trouble. Like, we needed to actually think about how to connect the individual to the service. So this person, she's my friend now, and I've worked with her since then, but she really went after me hard on that. And that's like part of being in public service, is getting yelled at from time to time because you're not seeing something from the perspective of somebody else. And so developing that ability, that empathy to understand where other people are coming from. Maybe some people are born with it. For me, I've often ended up having to reverse myself after getting pushed on something by advocates. In this case, what we did was then we created an additional, we paired a program with it, where we created a network of grassroots community organizations that then trained trusted members in these communities to be that connector. And the way I think about it is these little abuelitas, these little grandmothers who were very active in their churches. We took hundreds of them and did know your rights trainings. What happens when somebody knocks on your door? What happens when someone stops you on the street? Even if you're undocumented, there are things that you can do. There are steps that you can take. They're not allowed to just barge into your house, all right? And so starting with that and disseminating that information through what ended up being thousands of community residents who were very embedded in their communities, talking to their neighbors, telling other folks what their rights were.
Can you grab me my beer?
And then connecting them.
I think I left it on the counter.
And being able to connect them to a lawyer, so that when someone was given the chance to talk to some lawyer at a downtown Chicago law firm, it wasn't as intimidating because the neighbor, the church member, whoever it was able to say, oh, okay, you did these three things. Now let me connect you to this lawyer who's gonna talk to you about the next steps. And so it was an important for me. It was really. I mean, now I feel stupid for not having thought of this before, but it's an important part of all program design. How are you reaching people? You know, it's not enough just to create a benefit. You actually have to be thoughtful about how you reach those who can't help themselves. We carried this approach to the state of Illinois. In my last role, we created a $300 million business interruption grant program at the height of the pandemic. So this was in the summer when the governor was having to, we had just kind of gotten through the first phase. Everything seemed to be getting better. And then the numbers started skyrocketing again for COVID-19. And so we had to do these regional approaches where, indoor dining was shut down. We'd had restrictions on fitness centers and things like that. And so we were able to use federal CARES Act money. And the CARES Act was this emergency program created under the previous president and Congress that had a variety of emergency measures, including a chunk of funds for state and local governments. And so one of the things that we did with that was create this emergency grant program. But at the time, we were also informed by the initial rollout of the Paycheck Protection Program, which was this program to help businesses remain operational. And in the initial rollout, the money for the Paycheck Protection Program, which is an SBA program, was used up in like 14 days. And it was used up largely by businesses, because the banks were the intermediaries. They went to their clients. So if you didn't have a bank, you had trouble accessing the Paycheck Protection Program. So the early days were marred with reports that these funds were not reaching the smallest businesses. They were not reaching minority-owned businesses. So with our grant program, we wanted to avoid that. And so we created a Navigator network, similar to what we had done in Chicago, where we found organizations that reached into the churches, organizations that worked on other issues, but then we engaged with them to help us find business owners who, for whatever reason, they didn't think the programs were for them. Sometimes they weren't in compliance. In order to access some of these programs, you have to have your taxes all together. You have to be accounting for everything. And so sometimes these businesses needed a few hours of help getting into compliance. Sometimes the business owner didn't even have an email address, right? And so the Navigator could take that extra effort to make sure that those businesses were able to access what was available to them. And so by the end of the program, of the $300 million in grants, 40% of it went to minority-owned businesses. And that was really the product of this Navigator model. And so now I'm in the Biden administration, and within the first few weeks, you can come here, we, as part of the American Rescue Plan, we included 100 million, as my daughter, Juliana, she's saying hello. We included in the American Rescue Plan $100 million to do the Community Navigator model at a national level, so that we can ensure that businesses are plugged in to all the different aid programs that are being worked on now. So there's funding in the American Rescue Plan, there's additional help in the American Jobs Plan that the president talked about just last week. And what has changed, and what I hope remains sort of a way of doing business going forward, is that as we design programs like this that are intended to create opportunity, that we're thinking about how we're actually reaching people, and that we're putting more effort and more resources into that. And it's something I feel some ownership over. It's something that I've been able to, again, wasn't my idea. I got my rear handed to me by an advocate to start thinking about this, but I've carried it with me at every level of government. And now we have some real funding behind it at the SBA. And I'm hopeful that it's something that this administration will institutionalize. And so that as we do more work in the future, we're thinking about, well, how do the most vulnerable, how do the folks who are least plugged in, how are they processing this? And are we thinking about how to message to them? So, and again, that for me, that's something that it comes out of, who I grew up with, and how I think about how they process information. Every time when I talk to my mom every couple of days, and I see that, she's not the most careful reader of the news, or she's not the most educated consumer of what the government puts out. So it's something that's been on my mind as I've worked, and I'm hopeful that I've been able to contribute to more people getting access to more opportunity. So I spent a lot of time on those two initiatives that I've been able to work on in public service. I view them as this, as trying to make the connection between personnel and policy. I don't think that had I not had those experiences, or if someone else had been in the same position, I think these initiatives would have turned out differently. And I think I've had a positive effect on them, which in my view comes back to the importance of who goes into public service, and why it really is critically important that Fenwick graduates think about public service and go into public service, because I think the preparation that you get at Fenwick really uniquely prepares you to have a big impact. And I just want to close by talking about how fitting it is that this year's event is taking place on the same day that the president announced that the U.S. presence in Afghanistan is going to be fully withdrawn by September 11, 2021. 20 years removed from the 9/11 attacks, which was an event of singular significance in our country and for the world. And as I think about the last 2 decades, major wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, costing the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians, conflicts that came from from that instability in Libya, Syria, Yemen, and beyond, the hosting of detainees from the global war on terror at Gitmo, and the pressures it placed on our criminal justice system. It has been a tumultuous set of decades. And to me, it just brings to mind, again, just the life-changing impact that decisions made in national and state capitals can have on the lives of people, and why it's really important that good people go into public service. And so I'm optimistic that Fenwick will continue to send more of its graduates into public service. And I think that's wonderful, because this is a school community that focuses on the whole person. And that's just very important, because I do think personnel is policy, and we want good people going into public policy. So thank you for your patience. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody. I'm happy now to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, and as we move into the question and answer session, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. This is Shada Wong, by the way, English and World Languages teacher at Fenwick High School. And actually, before we start the Q&A, I did want to take some time to thank Mrs. Irene Drago, because we would not be here. The IRC, the Fenwick International Relations Club, would not even exist without Irene. So Irene, would you like to just say hello and tell us a little bit about how IRC started? Are you there, Irene?
I'm honored, Shauna, to be asked such a question. I didn't prepare anything, and I'm actually, the silver lining here is that we're on Zoom. I'm in Bath, Maine, which is very far away. But 2001 and 9/11 was really what brought me into the International Relations Club. I'm a New Yorker. That day had incredible impact on me personally, but Dr. Jim Quaid, the principal at the time, asked me to be part of the International Relations Club. Dr. Lorden had actually been a moderator of a different form of the club, and Jim wanted it to move more towards service, governments, international connections, how people come to serve. And I had worked for the National Security Agency in a former life and came from a military family. Interesting, Michael, my brother Michael served over 20 years in the Navy. My husband served in the Air Force. My dad was a Pearl Harbor survivor. So Jim Quaid wanted me to bring some of my experience to the club. And Smedinghoff was a freshman at that time. And after 9/11 and our entry into Afghanistan, there was going to be a walkout of students. Student unrest had hit Chicago, and Dr. Quaid was anticipating it and asked the International Relations Club to have a panel, have speakers. And my brother Michael, Commander Michael Murta, actually was on the panel, as was Ramsey Farran, our emeritus chemistry teacher, who had a lot of experience with the Middle East, obviously, and a theology teacher, a history teacher. It was quite the panel, and was in attendance. And she became active in the International Relations Club. And actually, members of her class were well represented in government service. And the classes that 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, those years were some of our early speakers. Kevin Kysiak, who became a Navy SEAL, was a graduate of that time frame. So that's what brought me to the International Relations Club. 9/11, really. And Anne Smedinghoff was the vice president, and she was the most active vice president. So we now have President Biden, who was a very good vice president. Well, Anne Smedinghoff stepped up quite a bit. And one of your officers mentioned their brother being in Mrs. Logas's class. Well, Anne stopped by my Spanish class, and that was room 23. Kevin Roach, who spoke earlier, was also a student in that room. And Chrissy Tallarico Lilick was also an AP Spanish student in room 23. And Smedinghoff was my outstanding AP Spanish student. And when she stopped by my door to talk with me, that was the last time I saw her. And she was going to Afghanistan, as your Fenwick student remembers. April 6th is the day that I always remember Anne. And Mr. and Mrs. Smedinghoff and I stay in touch. But I am thrilled that you have continued tradition since my retirement. Absolutely thrilled. And Michael, I can't think of a better speaker. You bring so much, and you really, in your presentation, embodied what we hoped for, not only the International Relations Club, scholarships, but this memorial speech and lecture that comes every year. Thank you so much for continuing it. And I know Mr. and Mrs. Smedinghoff are smiling on this evening. It means a lot to remember Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. I really appreciate that. And yes, thank you, Michael, for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your optimism with us. I took copious notes. Right now, we are going to start the Q&A. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat, and I will be happy to share them, and Michael will be happy to answer them. So right now, I don't have any questions in the chat. So I would actually like to start off by asking you, Michael, you had mentioned that your mom was undocumented. And I'm wondering, what is your response to people who say that the undocumented should be deported from the United States?
Well, I think we have, as a nation, we have a long history of ultimately being built by immigrants, and I think we have to have a legal immigration system that where there's a process and there are rules, and we need people to follow the rules, but at the same time we have to view things humanely, and I don't think it's in anybody's interest to do a mass deportation of undocumented residents, particularly for the many who've been here a long time and are paying taxes and are working. They're working in our restaurants. They're working they're working on farms. They're working in a whole host of different jobs across the country. And it is not in our economic interests, and it does not align with our morals to undergo some kind of dragnet where people are being chased out of the country. So I think in a rational, if we were in a rational political environment, we could reach some kind of agreement where there is a path to citizenship, where rules are enforced, where we ensure that the incentives are there for legal immigration. And I think that's something that has been tried by leaders of both parties over the years and has failed every time. But I'm optimistic that at some point in the coming years, we will get there. But in the meantime, I think it's important to just remember that it's a part of our history, that immigrants have come and have been innovators, have been hardworking, have contributed to our societies. They pay taxes, and we should just remember that. So that's my view, and in the context of, in the world in which within which I have been able to influence policy, we have really focused on ensuring that dreamers, immigrants who are in sort of uncertain states, people who are here legally but have an ITIN, are able to access programs on the same terms as everyone else, because we've seen that not everybody views it the same way, and so elections can have real consequences. It can be really shattering for a family if you have leadership that tries to drive people out of the country. So that's my view. I think it's an issue that we should expect to really be a divider in our national politics and our local politics for years to come. But I am hopeful that over time, the very evident national self-interest, our economic self-interest, and ultimately our morality will win out, and we will figure out some comprehensive approach that balances the different tensions that exist in our immigration system today.
Thank you, Michael. We have two questions in the chat. The first one is from Anna Mulcahy. She's asking, what advice would you give to a rising college freshman who is interested in political science?
I always like that question. I think flexibility and openness. So, I think people often want to be part of the biggest game that they can be part of. And so you might think, oh, I should go as a college student, I should go intern in Congress, or I should, try to work for some major elected official. I think, and that's certainly a fair approach. My view over time has been look for the best role that you can possibly have. And sometimes that might be somewhere you won't expect it. Because in those situations, you can get more responsibility or more exposure than you might otherwise have gotten, right? If you're trying to intern in Congress or for governor or what have you, you may be one of 30 people, and your exposure might be quite limited to sort of being in the room when big conversations are happening, to being handed a stack of papers and being told to figure it out. And those are that latter category. Those can be some of the most meaningful experiences when you are challenged or you're given a chance to see things that you might not otherwise have seen. And so I always advise people to think about the role, particularly earlier in your career, and seek the most interesting, the most challenging role that you can get. And it may be most likely to actually be in the places that you don't watch TV shows about, or you don't read about in the most popular biographies. I can say just from a personal, I went into, after graduating from law school, I went onto the Obama campaign, went to Washington. I had every intention of being there for both terms. And, we thought we would have our first kid while in Washington, and then we'd move back to Chicago. I was about 2 years in. I had a friend of mine who I'd gone to law school with and had worked with before. He was working for Rahm Emanuel, and they called me about a job. He had just won office, and they called me about. I was not expecting it at all. I was not looking for local government. In fact, I had no interest in local government previously. But it was a job where I was going to have a team of like 10 people. The pay was going to be a lot more than I was making at the federal level. And the mayor's office has like 60 people. So it just struck me as an opportunity to do more than I otherwise would be doing. Like if I had stayed in Washington, I would have continued to be a staffer, and maybe towards the end of the term, maybe I'd be managing people. I don't know. But it really thrust me into a situation where I had a lot more responsibility than I was expecting. And within a couple of years, I was his policy director, and I, was talking to the mayor all the time, and I was in meetings, and he, called me at 6 a.m. to yell at me about something, and he still calls me to yell at me about stuff, even though we're not working with each other anymore. So it was a tremendous exposure. I wasn't expecting it, and I feel very fortunate to have had it. And so that's generally my advice. Think about the role, get as much exposure as you can, and oftentimes it will be in the things that you don't think about when you're daydreaming about being in public service.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Michael. Our next question is from Peter Durkin, and he asks, with the country being so polarized right now, do you still approach your work with bipartisanship in mind? Do you have tips for our young friars and working with people who don't see the world the way that you do?
Yes, it's something that I think about a lot, and particularly in the path I've taken the last decade or so, in local government, our cities, our city elected officials are predominantly Democratic, right? So big city politics, a lot of Democrats in power. But when you get down to the issues that people care about in local government, these are quality of life. These are just very front of mind issues that don't often, in some of these, on some topics, it can get quite polarized, but in many of these topics, it's about we have a recycling problem. What do we do about it, right? We have an issue with this new type of business, and they're operating unlicensed, and how do we find a solution to bring them out of the shadows and so it's a lot of sort of practical problems where you have to just get people together and figure something out. And so over the course of the last, and then when I was in state government, we had very large majorities in the House and the Senate. So there wasn't an incentive to be bipartisan, but in the department that I was in, which is a DCO, which does economic development, we had a lot of capital dollars out of the Rebuild Illinois plan. So that's money that goes into projects, capital revitalization. It could be, helping rehabilitate land that could then be put back on the market, things like that. So even though as an administration, there was the Democrats could just pass whatever they wanted for the most part, in the work of the department, we had projects all across the state. And so you'd work with a Republican, even if the Republican doesn't like 95% of the governor's agenda, you have a specific project in their district and you're trying to find consensus with them, and you want to make sure that it meets the goals of that elected's community. So I say that to just suggest that over the course of the last decade, I have been, other than as a viewer of what's happening on television and talking to friends who are still in that environment, I have not been in a partisan hothouse over the course of the last decade. And so coming into it now, I'm sure I'll have more thoughts a year from now once I'm actually in Washington. But it hangs over everything. I think the president's instinct and his nature is to want to work with people and to reach deals and agreements. But right now the incentives just aren't there for anybody, right? The primary system rewards the most partisan candidates. And so there's such a level of gerrymandering that most national elected officials, their main fear is not a general election, but a primary election. And so they think about governance in that way. And particularly for members of Congress, you start immediately raising money as soon as you take office. And so, I think it's a tough environment. But what I've seen some evidence of, you may not get their votes, but we have tried to, on a lot of the small business programs that we're working on, there is a lot of bipartisan interest, and we try to just talk about the policy, find ideas that we can align around, because I do, particularly when thinking about the Small Business Committee, Senator Rubio has been very engaged on the Paycheck Protection Program and has a lot of thoughts about what we should put in the jobs package, particularly with respect to manufacturing. And we're going to have good substantive conversations with this team about it. 95% chance we will not have his vote, and it'll be for reasons that have nothing to do with the policy. And it's just the environment that we're in right now. So the way I think about it, and I can think about it this way because it's not my job to manage the president's politics. It's my job to work on small business, economic development issues. So the way I think about it is I try to find good ideas, a little bit from this column, a little bit from that column. Let's achieve some consensus, knowing that at the end of the day, it is highly likely that the people we're working with just aren't going to vote for it for a variety of reasons. It could be they don't like the fact that we might be doing something through a mechanism called reconciliation, where you can't filibuster, you can pass things with 50 votes. It might be because somebody's worried about a primary. It might be because somebody's planning to run for president and they don't want to, they want to be on the record of opposing everything. But I have seen we can have conversations. We just had one with some Rubio folks 2 weeks ago that were really just about the policy. Other people were worried about the votes. We were talking about the policy and what are the right changes that we could make. I'm thinking in that particular conversation, how can we increase access to capital for small businesses that are looking to be part of the supply chain? So, there is opportunity there, but there are just some broader structural impediments right now to passing things with 70 votes, right? So, but again, it's not my job to focus on that. My job is to focus on the policy, and there are areas where we can work with each other to find the right solutions.
Thank you, Michael. We have 3 more questions in the chat, but we are over time. So I am going to ask Christopher Ritten's question, because Christopher is going to talk to us next about how we can continue the scholarship. Christopher Ritten's question was, do you hope or plan to run for elective office again, whether at the local, state, or national level? And if so, what would be the ideal office at this point in your career?
I am too recently a candidate for office to not instinctively avoid giving you a definitive answer. Look, it is something that that I will not say no to. That I will not rule out. That's not right. I will not rule it out. Okay, but it was hard. It was very hard. It was very challenging. It was hard on my wife, who is a very busy attorney. So, when I'm out knocking doors or raising money or doing those things, there's one parent dealing with 2 kids. And so it's very difficult. A lot of, there are elements of it that are fun. There are elements of it that are not fun. And so, honestly, it's something I want to be open to, but we'll see. If I do it again, we're going to have to talk it through. It's going to have to be the right opportunity. She's going to need to be on board. I don't want to never see our kid. When I ran the first time, our kids were younger, and right. And not to say that being away is meaning, but like when your kids are 3 and 5 and you're gone for 6 hours and you're back, it's like you were never gone. If this is 10 years from now and I'm gone half the time, it's more meaningful to them, right? There are more things that I'm missing. My absence is more. So like these are just factors that we'll have to think about. And so I don't know, but I'm going to live my life as it's something that I'm open to, but I really don't know. And we're moving to Washington. I don't know how that's going to pan out. I'm planning to come back, but all kinds of things. Is that a surprise? Did you think we were moving permanently? So we'll see. But I don't know what'll happen. But it's something. I want to have the door open to it, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And now, Christopher, would you like to talk to us a little bit about contributing to Fenwick?
Sure. Thank you very much, Shana. And Michael, you answered that question like a good politician, I'm sure. And I'm sure the hardest thing to leave behind is that little one in your lap, for sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Ritten. I'm the Vice President of Institutional Advancement at Fenwick. So I'm in charge of the external things that Fenwick does, and one of which is fundraising. And so I want to extend my own welcome to all of you and thank you for being here. And in particular, Michael, thank you for your comments on public policy and service and, making the connection between personnel and policy. I like that quite a bit. And by the way, Michael, once you move, please keep your contact information current with us, because I'd like to do a Fenwick alumni event in DC sometime later this year or early next year. So we'll make sure that you get invited to that. But aside from that, as Kevin Roach mentioned early on, keeping Ann's legacy alive at Fenwick is quite important. And we do that through the speaker series, but we also obviously do that through the scholarship fund. And that, as Kevin mentioned, is funded by donors. And so we appreciate very much any of your support in that effort to be able to offer these scholarships to our rising seniors interested in international relations and public service. So a couple of ways that you might consider supporting this scholarship fund. If you care to go online and make a donation that way, you can go directly to the Fenwick website, fenwickfriars.com. In the upper right, you'll see a kind of an oval reddish button that says support. Click on that, and you'll see on the next page a big rectangular button that says make a gift. And if you click on make a gift, you'll get to our main donation page, where you'll see a drop-down menu that says I want to support. And in that drop-down menu, you can choose the Ann Smedinghoff 05 Memorial Fund. So if you want to go online, again, fenwickfriars.com, click on support, click on make a gift, and then use the drop-down menu item in the I want to support box, and you'll see Ann Smedinghoff 05 Memorial Fund. Or you can simply write a check to Fenwick High School, put on the memo line, Smedinghoff Fund, something like that, and send that to my attention or the attention of the advancement office at Fenwick High School, which is 505 Washington Boulevard, Oak Park, 60302. Or you can always call me or email me too. Again, Chris Ritten, R-I-T-T-E-N at Fenwick. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Caitlin and Anna Mulcahy, would you like to introduce Vivian and Matthew Bryan quickly?
All right, so thank you so much, Mr. Ritten. And now, as Ms. Wong just said, I would like to introduce Vivian, who is a junior on our marketing executive board of the International Relations Club, for the gift presentation.
Hello, my name is Vivian Hernandez, as you know, and I'm a junior and I'm part of the executive board. As a token of our appreciation for Mr. Negron, we would like to send them a gift basket, which include items from the Fenwick Friar Shop, personally handpicked by Julie Wildermuth. Thank you, Mr. Negron, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to educate us and to honor Anne's legacy. We greatly appreciate your service to our community and to our country.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Shannon, and I'm a junior. I'm the treasurer of the International Relations Club, and we'd like to thank you all so much for being here. First off, I would like to thank Ann Smedinghoff for her sacrifice and service. I would also like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Smedinghoff for being here and making this memorial lecture so special year after year. The memorial lecture would also not be possible without the following: Mr. and Mrs. Smedinghoff, Mr. Michael Negron, Father Richard Petticord, Mr. Peter Groom, Dr. Gerald Lorden, Miss Irene Drago, Mr. Christopher Ritten, Miss Karen Campagna, Miss Jennifer Wilson, Miss Marilyn Frizz, Mr. Alex Holmberg, Mr. Kevin Roach, Mr. John Quinn, Miss Julie Wildermuth, Mr. Scott Hardesty, Mr. Mark Verno, and Mr. Peter Durkin. Lastly, on behalf of the International Relations Executive Board, we would like to thank Ms. Wong for all of her hard work throughout the year. Every day, she inspires us to work hard and make this world a better place. Ann Smedinghoff teaches us to lead in the same way. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Matthew Bryan. And Father Petticord, would you please give the closing prayer?
Yes, thank you very much, Shana, and to the Smedinghoffs and all that are with us tonight. Again, we thank you for the gift of Anne and her legacy, her exemplifying the values that support us as Fenwick Friars. And as we conclude tonight, we say together, glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Saint Dominic, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you, Father, and thank you all. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.